Well, welcome everyone to the HomeViews Sustainability webinar. This is also the sort of prelude to the report that will launch today as well. So for any of you that have signed up for the webinar, you'll be getting an email straight after this to download our free sustainability report, and our partners and our market insights partners will also be getting all of the additional information that we provide on sustainability data as well. First things first, let me introduce you to my all-star panel, Anna, Sam and John. I'm just going to share my screen so we can kick off proceedings. So Anna Brennikov, Anna is Director of ESG at Zoopla. Anna, thank you so much for joining us. And HomeViews have, over the years, collaborated with Zoopla on a number of data projects and reports. And Anna's been with Zoopla for 6 years and is incredibly passionate about the positive impact and value creation businesses can drive through responsible and sustainable corporate strategy. The passion was a key driver in her move from a previous role, which was focusing on data and solutions and monetization, into a current position as Director of ESG, which was a recent promotion. Congratulations, Anna. Thank you so much for joining us. Sam Smart. Sam's Managing Director at Stonewood Homes and Director at Stonewood Builders. Sam joined Stonewood as a site manager in 2006. He's worked his way all the way up. He brought with him 10 years experience as a carpenter within his family business, and then began running high-spec renovations, conservation and new build projects before being appointed director in 2016, and now leads the new homes division for Stonewood. So welcome, Sam. Great to see you.
Morning.
And then finally, John O'Dwyer. John's head of sustainability at Telford Homes. John joined Telford Homes in 2017 as the group sustainability manager with over 12 years experience in sustainability. And John's role at Telford, which is really, I think, a market leading brand when it comes to sustainability and the way that they're implementing that across their business. But John's role at Telford, it includes implementing the company's sustainability strategy, building a living legacy, and embedding it as a golden thread across all departments, along with corporate reporting and managing the next generation annual sustainability benchmarking submission, which we're going to talk a little bit more about in the session, where Telford are actually currently ranked as the #1 sustainable house builder in the UK, a fantastic accolade and testament to all the work that John and his team have been doing. He also initiated and developed the company's sustainability 2-year e-learning training program, carrying out role-specific training and needs analysis. So welcome to the panelists. I think you'll all agree this is a kind of a perfect panel to discuss what is an incredibly broad subject. I think just to start off, and I always have to do this slightly shameless plug for HomeViews, but it might be some of you haven't heard of HomeViews. Why are we in a position to provide a level of data to talk about around sustainability? So HomeViews is a dedicated review website for new build developments. Our mission statement is to provide useful and trustworthy insights to help those, to support those looking for their new home, whether you're looking at renting or buying, whether you're an owner or you're a shared owner. We are the only dedicated new build review site. Our reviews are verified. They go through a very strict verification process. So all the data we're talking about is based off verified resident data only. The reviews are at a development level, and so we can be very granular and very focused on the feedback from residents. And they're also segmented by reviewer type: owners, shared owners, age groups, etc. There's over 18 data points in just one HomeViews review. And through all of this, we've been able to create a database which really benchmarks what good looks like against each sector. Not just in sustainability, in lots of different data points. And we're now over 38,000 reviews. This is growing every week. It's so exciting to see. And we cover nearly 2,500 developments. And within those developments, there are around about 480,000 homes. And we have over 2 million people a year visiting HomeViews to help them find their new home. They're looking for reviews, for content to help them decide whether this building is right for them or whether this brand is the right brand to invest in or to rent from, and also looking for sort of best-in-class buildings within a location. And we work with a real cross-section of the industry, from small boutique developers like Stonewood to larger scale developers like Telford and John, and with major housing associations like L&Q, the build to rent sector, and with national house builders like Lovell Homes and Redrow. So a real cross section, over 50 brands now. So moving on to why we can provide this data. So in 2021, we actually started asking a specific question to residents: are environmentally sustainable features important to you? The reason we started asking this is there is so much rhetoric around sustainability in the housing sector. There are so many targets to meet, yet no one was really mentioning sustainability in our reviews, which was actually making us pretty sad. As a team, we're very much focused on providing data and insights to help improve the housing sector. And so we began to ask this in 2021, so that if someone selects yes, environmentally features are important to them, they're then asked to select from a list of features of their home what are most important to them. And so the sustainability report, which we did last year and we're doing again this year, is based off 12,631 verified residents, a huge data set, consisting of owners, private tenants and shared owners, and cross-sector, build to rent, build to sell, the whole shebang. A quarter of these reviews are actually from build to rent tenants. And a headline stat is that 72% of residents say that environmentally sustainable features are important to them. That's up on 70% in the same from the same data set a year ago. But what's really interesting is how this changes when you look at age groups. So there's a 20% difference of people that said sustainable features are important to them, from the 18 to 24-year-olds to the 65 pluses. I'll come on to why we think that why that might be. In terms of the features of their home, the most important, or the most talked about, is recycling, interestingly, then energy saving measures, then renewable energy, and at the bottom of this list comes sustainable construction, which I think we all know as an industry is so key if we're going to reduce the carbon footprint of the housing sector. So I'll go into a little bit more detail about how we think we can change this dynamic. But I think really interesting to see that residents, it's the tangible things, it's the things that they're actually educated in their normal lives that are also being projected onto how they view their home. If you look at how if there's a correlation between age and certain features. So as age increases, the proportion who state that bike storage and or recycling actually drops. Maybe the bike storage is slightly understandable, but for a 65 plus, but and also maybe also predicated on the age groups in urban areas as well, in terms of the residents within new build. But as age increases, the proportion who value energy saving, eco ratings and sustainable construction methods increases. And I think that this is also I think predicated on a lot of the younger generation are renters on HomeViews, and a lot of the older generation are owners. And I think this also kind of shows this difference between when you're buying a home, maybe what features of your home you will regard as important. I also think it's obvious as an older age group, maybe affordability comes less into factor. You can afford to buy what you want to. You're actually looking for homes that promote sustainable features. And I know Sam will have a lot of view on this when it comes to Stonewood, because it's absolutely front and center of how you market your properties. In terms of how does the residence location affect the sustainable features they choose? So I can't get my words out this morning. Sustainable features they choose and they value. Overall, sustainability was more important to residents living in London, with a 77% average, compared to other UK regions at 70%. 87% of residents in North East London said sustainability was important to them. and the highest proportion of any UK area. I thought that was fascinating as a Londoner. And outside of London, sustainability was most important to residents in the southeast and the southwest. I think there's probably lots of overlaying you could do with socio-demographics around this and also affordability. But I think that, the takeout is there are pockets where it spikes, but in general, that 72% is a kind of general rule. Londoners value sustainability more than their regional counterparts across every age bracket, except the 55 to 64s. We are hoping for that perfect correlation. It doesn't always happen, but you can see in general, Londoners right across the spectrum have sustainability matters more to them when it comes to their home than it does regionally. And in terms of when we're looking at sort of the sentiment analysis around recycling, I thought, and by the way, I've just taken a complete summary of the report. There's a lot more data within the report. There's a lot more analysis of the certain features that are important to them and some of the qualitative feedback we get from residents in there. So please do read the report. But when it came to recycling, I think it was, this quote here sort of perfectly underpins this. People were getting really frustrated if a building didn't provide them with the ability to recycle properly. So glass recycling, food and waste recycling, cardboard recycling. And they also really resented their fellow residents if they didn't recycle, which, that this was a really very emotive subject. And I think that taking a step back and what can we learn from some of our data? And as I said, this really was just a summary of what we've provided. I think what we learned is that, different resident types, but different age groups feel differently about sustainability when it comes to their home. I think that it's very obvious for us to see that, the younger generation, but also tenants find it difficult to really apply the same rationale as an owner would do. I think affordability comes into that younger generation's lower percentage. But I think it is fascinating as well that if you think about the level of exposure that we all have to sustainability when it comes to recycling, when it comes to plastic waste, the impact it has on our oceans, it's probably one of the most well communicated elements of sustainability and what we should be doing. And that naturally applies to people when they look at their home. I think what we all need to take out of this as an industry is we need to educate better, because we all know that recycling is and energy saving measures are small aspects of a much bigger picture, and the fact that sustainable building methods, sustainable materials are not really factoring in to the younger generation's decision making. I think this is a real sort of heads up that we need to be doing better to educate them on the impact that these features can have. And I'm pleased to say I think we're going to tackle a lot of these questions in this session today. So there are a lot more information in the report. There's some brilliant case studies within the report as well. One with David Phillips looking at how they've done an incredible piece of work with Get Living at East Village on recycling all of the furniture within that development, achieving a zero landfill for furniture refresh on over 1,400 homes, which is incredible. 942 tons saved from landfill, over 16,000 items collected. Just an incredible example of how, particularly in the build to rent sector, when it's not just about the bricks and mortar that can have an impact on sustainability. Incredible example of something that's worked really well. Also, one of our sponsors, Interlaced Blinds, I think this was a really interesting. We did a report a few years ago on heating and cooling within new build, and the fact that overheat it's a major issue within new builds, particularly towers, particularly glass towers. And obviously in urban areas, this is really prevalent. And what I loved with the data that we were able to show with Interlace is actually, something as simple as a good quality blind can have a huge impact on the heating issues within new build, and reduction of a cooling load for 12 to 13% if you're integrating these as part of your basic offer. It doesn't all have to be about comfort cooling and all the rest of it, which obviously can put you way off from meeting some of your sustainable targets. So really great case study with Interlace. And we're joined by Sam today, but we do a deep dive into Orchard Fields, which is a development by Stonewood that's really put, I think, sustainability as a core part of its marketing strategy, and it effectively has smashed it out the park on the back of it. And it is very interesting, Sam's take on where you can apply this and whether you can achieve a premium. We're going to get into all of that in the conversation today. So if you are sitting there and thinking you'd like to get a level of insight and a level of data and feedback from your residents, please do get in contact with us, and you can now download the report through this QR code, but you'll also receive an email after this session. So that is the presentation from me. You'll be pleased to hear. Now I'm going to move on to having a conversation with some of our panelists. So John, firstly to you as head of sustainability at Telford Homes. I mean, ESG and sustainability is an incredibly hot topic at the moment, but how does it fit into Telford's long-term strategy? It feels like you're quite far ahead of the curve when it comes to sort of larger scale developers. So how are you implementing that across your business?
No, yes, thank you, Rory. So look, we were one of the first developers to publish a broadly defined sustainability roadmap out to 2030. So obviously this had milestones right across the ESG spectrum, including commitments around biodiversity net positive schemes, sending zero waste to landfill, enhancing social value, in addition to net zero carbon developments. And I think the net zero carbon agenda is of paramount importance. So we're now carrying out whole life carbon assessments on all our future schemes to really get under the hood and understand both the embodied and operational carbon over a building's life cycle. And from a sort of a social value perspective, I know there's been some Q&A coming in on this. We've carried out a 5-year social value legacy review to really understand what's working well and what isn't for our residents. And obviously we commissioned HomeViews to undertake some additional survey questioning to inform this work, and got some really telling, valuable insights. Just a few as an example. So 73% of our residents rated their sense of community as good, and over 2/3 experienced a positive sense of happiness since moving in. So there's some highlights amongst a lot of other things that work's really informing things like our build to rent design guide and other work streams in the business. So totally agree.
Thanks, John. Well, I just for everyone that's joined, please do fire questions at us. Ideally, just put your company name in when you send the question, just so we know who you're from. But just to wrap up that, James, you asked, are you planning to ask social sustainability within a development? Our partners, when we collaborate with a brand, they can ask additional questions that were private to them. John just quoted some of the additional questions Telford choose to ask. But I think what we also, you've got to remember, although we are specifically about that sustainability and the features of their home, often the social sustainability aspects come through in the body of the reviews. People are talking about their home, the sense of community. We ask, please share one thing or more you wish you'd known before you'd moved in, or what do you like and dislike about the area? So the ratings on HomeViews and the kind of tick box questions we ask is definitely one aspect, but I often think you get that social aspect from the qualitative feedback within reviews. So John, just coming back to next generation benchmark for sustainability, I think ensuring house builders are accountable for their sustainability and ESG goals. Or that's a question. Do you feel like they are ensuring and I think that one thing from a consumer's perspective is there aren't many kite marks that exist to help you decide whether this is a sustainable business or there's obviously building level stats, but how do you feel that this can help, and where do you see this moving over the next few years?
Yes, obviously, as you've said, Rory, we're delighted to have led the benchmark for the last 2 years. I think it not only provides a framework for driving sustainability standards and performance, but in effect, most house builders now have net zero carbon roadmaps and commitments to climate related science-based targets. But it also encourages greater transparency, which is important for the public to make those decisions. It provides investors and lenders with greater visibility on performance, as obviously they're looking to decarbonise their portfolios. And of course, Lloyds Bank are now part of the next generation executive and are linking the requirements to their green lending criteria. And I think with all of this in mind, we as developers, us in Telford, we've tried to be more creative and interactive with our annual sustainability reporting, and have sort of migrated away from static reports to like including video testimony and click and play animations. But one thing we haven't mentioned, Rory, is that there is also a home quality mark, which is a BRE standard. It's end user focused as well. So, it basically gives a star rating on how sustainable a home is. So that's okay. Something that's getting a little bit more traction, is home quality mark.
Home quality mark. Thanks, John. I couldn't agree. What I found fascinating, I attended the Resi 360 conference about a month ago, and every conference I go to, and we go to a lot, you're seeing the ESG agenda and sustainability agenda filter into most discussions. But what was really stark to me was how lenders are very much saying, I saw a board with Barclays, Lloyds, Man Group saying, if you have the opportunity to invest in two businesses side by side, and one has a well implemented sustainability and ESG agenda and the other doesn't, it's a no-brainer. And I think that is really, coming to the fore within this market, particularly in a difficult environment where funding is challenging, to say the least. So Sam, a couple of questions for you, Sam. So Orchard Field is a major case study in this sustainability report. You go above and beyond at Orchard Field in terms of the features that you offer. So I'd love to hear a little bit about that, but I'd also love to hear about, what do you feel should be provided as standard? I mean, what you've done at Orchard Field is going above and beyond, and I think it's proven to be a huge success. So I'd love to hear about that. But what are your takeouts from that and from the experience from a cost perspective and everything that you've learned on this development?
You have to be careful, because you can have me talking all day. So it's been a real journey, actually. Orchard Field specifically. I think the big takeout for me is the amount of greenwash in the industry that gets spread across all the new housing developments, pitching them to be sustainable, but really they're not. And what we've done at Orchard Field is really focused on a fabric first approach. So having a really high performing envelope of a building, which reduces heat demand considerably compared to a standard Victorian house. I think we're 90% lower, and the current new building regs we're 75% lower from a heating demand. And when you get under the skin of that, and you see an equivalent EPC A-rated building that sort of in line with our Orchard Field development, it's really the education on how that property gets used, and the heats and the energy requirement to run a property. Obviously, you only generate electricity from solar panels during the day, and obviously during sunny weather conditions, and that's only when it really benefits the national house builders, or the majority of the industry's current building regs specification houses with their lower heating demand. So unless you're really buying into that new way of living, it's effectively greenwash, is our opinion. So yeah, we really focus on fabric first, but maintaining quality and functionality and aesthetics within our design. So you find a lot with the pushing the envelope on sustainability from a fabric point of view and energy performance. There's a compromise with the design, and I think we've managed to have a really great balance up at Orchard Field with producing, still having high ceilings, large windows, beautiful kitchens, all of those aesthetics that people want in a home. They don't want to compromise in a high energy performing house. So,
and I hear that on the back of Orchard Field that you're actually launching into a new project with partnership with Somerset Council as well.
Yeah, really.
A number of new homes.
Yeah, sorry, Rory. Yeah, it's really exciting. So our Orchard Field development up this Cirencester is based on an AECB accreditation. So it's a sort of step up from, or step down, should I say, from passive house. Really high performing. Sort of 44 kilowatt hours per meter squared per year, compared to passive house, which is around 15 kilowatts, and the standard building regs one's about 80. So Orchard Field, in answer to your question, has been a great stepping stone to this scheme. 52 new builds down in Nailsea, which are passive house standard. So the education on how to deliver that, the supply chain is giving us that opportunity to carry on our march for our sustainable homes. It's a fantastic opportunity.
So that sort of case study has given you a springboard. It's given you a new opportunity.
Exactly.
Which we all know land is difficult to come by. So if you're able to partner with a public sector body and create that partnership, that's fantastic. Sam, your broadband is jumping out a little bit, so I might ask you, if you don't mind, just to take your video off, because there's one more question I want to get, and I want to make sure we get it clearly. So one of the things around Orchard Fields, I think the question I get asked all the time is, are people prepared to pay a premium for sustainability? And it always comes down to pounds shilling. Well, it doesn't always, but it does come down to pounds, shillings and pence when it comes to property and how we can make a development work. Have you seen a premium over and above what you would expect to see because of the sustainable features and the way that you marketed that product? And versus cost of implementation? I'd love to understand about that. And also, one thing you mentioned to me before is, the demographics of your buyers. They are older. A lot of them are sort of downsizing out of maybe a historic home to live somewhere more comfortable. So they have that, they're actively looking. So could you just talk around those two things, that sort of premium aspect, and what your experience was with that, and the demographics of your buyers there?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I hope you can hear me okay. Can you?
Yeah, absolutely. Can hear you.
Benefit to all. So yeah, really good journey as well. When we set out in Orchard Field, particularly looking at the cost per square foot as we work in the new homes world, the uplift in cost to build a sustainable home to the standards we want. When we looked at it originally 3 years ago, it was estimated to be between 20 and 25% premium in producing a sustainable home. We've worked really hard with various partners and consultants, Green Gauge, and and various others to really fine tune the product selection to get that down. I think we're running about 15% increase in cost compared to a standard new build home. And in answer to selling them, yeah, they're selling like hotcakes. I mean, we're pre-sold off plan on all the units before we release them, which is fantastic, because when you go into a development of this scale with no no existing measure to gauge against to see where there is a market for that, it's really reassuring that it's our belief many years ago has been backed up, dare I say, with economic changes in climate and results. And in answer to your demographic question, I think it completely in line with your report, Rory. It's the more affluent, older demographic and young professionals that are buying into our schemes. Ones that have sort of they have a more disposable cash to be able to invest in something.
And also, I think the families are slightly older, aren't they, in terms of?
Yeah.
Well, listen, I think it's a great case study to show how homes can be built with and putting sustainability first, achieving a premium, achieving a fantastic sales rate, not compromising on design. However, the challenge to the industry is, how do we get everyone thinking about this in the way that we need to? How do we get everyone appreciating what comes into a building? And Anna, I think you've got a really unique view as Zoopla, with the huge audience that you have a year. With everything that's going on in the world at the moment, are you finding that sustainable features are becoming more important to buyers? Are you seeing that kind of creep up in your search terms? And I know you've got a really key view on EPCs. Just talk me through your thoughts on this, particularly in the climate today.
Yeah, I mean, I would definitely say that sustainable features are important to buyers. In fact, we're actively trying to figure out how we best surface sustainable features to home movers so that they can use it as a comparative tool, so they can look at it from a value perspective. We are very much focused on that because there is definitely a need coming from the consumers and the users of Zoopla. I think the bigger challenge is trying to educate buyers and homeowners who don't even intend to move, but trying to educate people generally on what features actually have the biggest impact to their carbon footprint. We mentioned this in terms of buying new builds and kind of sustainable sourcing and building and all the construction materials. When the government did research to support their heat and building strategy last year, I think roughly 82% of people identified as very or at least fairly concerned about climate change. But they also noted throughout their research that people had actually a really limited, accurate knowledge or understanding of what in their behaviours, in their environment, and what was actually within their wheelhouse to do would have an impact on achieving kind of net zero for them, their family, or whatever it might be. So it's a huge education piece, massive. Things like people are overvaluing things like recycling, which is important, but nowhere near as important as having a well-insulated home. So we're seeing a trend. People definitely care about being sustainable. How they are effectively sustainable, particularly when it comes to occupying a home and buying a home, is something that we all need to invest from an education perspective. And we're putting targets out there around how many green pieces of content we're getting out there on a quarterly basis, and how we can respond to kind of a little bit of myth busting as well. So I think it's incredibly important to buyers. We're just trying to figure out how we best turn up for them, I suppose.
And it's fascinating, isn't it? Like EPCs, I don't think we've had a couple of questions actually from Florian and from Emily, which I'll come on to. But I think one of the things, Anna, we were talking about is EPCs are pretty opaque in that the consumer doesn't really understand them. However, we can see on the horizon that EPCs may well be factored into by mortgage providers, and in the future maybe define how much you can borrow. By the way, guys, just for the audience, that we're going to come on to tenants, because we've also got a question as will tenants pay a premium dependent on an EPC rating of a building? But I think this question is, how do you make EPCs more transparent, and when do you think this is really going to start hitting home? Because I think everyone suddenly had a real wake-up call around your energy providers or energy bills, something that wasn't really on a lot of people's radar, and this is going to stay with people. This is going to now, what's going on today, I think, is going to make people look at their homes and how energy efficient they are differently. And I think that really plays into the new builds, the new build industry's core. It's a chance for us to really promote the fact that new build is more sustainable and is more energy efficient. So what's your view on how EPCs may impact the buyer journey and the lenders, and what would you like to see being done?
Yeah, so the banks are all over this. EPC will absolutely become a factor in terms of how much you can borrow from the bank, and the efficiency of a property will definitely weigh in to the bank's valuation decisions in the future. That is going to happen. It's also part of the Gov's net zero strategy, right? We've got to decarbonise our property, and one of the only ways that we can do that is to make sure that people do connect value with efficiency. So that's a journey we're already on. That's going to only accelerate over the next few years. I would say a challenge with EPC is that it only shows kind of half of the story with a house, and actually to the detriment of all the work that you're doing in the sustainability space from a building perspective. So with EPC, it's 200 data points, fantastic. They're not really surfaced properly to movers at the moment, at least not by us. We're working on it. But if you think about it, the EPC is telling you how efficient the property runs. It's not at all talking about climate impact, right? So the difference between whether or not you have a gas boiler or a heat pump has a massive implication on how many carbon emissions that property will produce in a year. And so when we've talked to BASE, when we've talked to the government departments about this before, they have said that they are looking into evolving EPC into more of a holistic kind of climate impact registry instead, which would be very, very interesting. And actually, that would then also take into consideration construction and all of those other things. And, you know, what is the actual life cycle of the emissions of a single property? So there's a lot of work to be done on EPC. It's not surfaced correctly. There's not enough education around it. I mean, 60% of all homeowners at the moment don't even have an EPC rating. They don't know what the EPC rating of their home is. So, you know, then they're about to go onto that move journey, and you're expecting them to become experts overnight on the things that matter and where they should be paying a premium. There's a lot of work to do in this space. And, you know, again, the government marked this as a challenge when they released their heat and buildings strategy back in 2021. They said, we need to educate consumers, and almost basically admitted they don't know how to do it. So, you know, we're all in it together, I think, here in terms of that behavior change.
I couldn't agree more. I actually think I sit in a lot of meetings with brands from across the sectors, build to rent, build to sell, housing associations, and we get asked this question a lot. You know, what are people prepared to pay a premium for? And I think what this report really shows is, if we as an industry, if you as developers or operators don't include this education within your marketing, and don't illustrate how a heat source pump can have a major impact on the carbon footprint and the lifetime of a building, well, the consumer isn't going to understand that, and they're not getting that from anywhere else. So I do think there is a kind of the onus on the industry to start including this education within the marketing materials of developments. So I think that while right now it's really difficult to say in the mass market, whether you're renting or buying, the sustainable features of a home will mean that someone's prepared to pay a premium. But what you can educate them is how much it might save them, how much it might save them over the time, the fact that you're future-proofing the value of your home by buying a sustainable home or investing in a sustainable home. But also, if you're a renter, and I think this is really important, is it's going to be about choice. If you've got, in the same way that the sort of funders are telling us, well, if we've got, you know, one company that's sustainably minded and got a great sustainable agenda versus another who doesn't, they're going to invest in that. But I think the consumer will have the same approach. And I think this is about differentiation right now, but it definitely needs to come through in the marketing loud and clear. We have some very specific questions. Andrew Day, hi Andrew. So retail banks, NatWest are lending against EPC A and B, and corporate lending sustainability links loans aligned to SAPs and EPCs now. So actually that's less of a question, more of a statement. Thank you, Andrew. So this is happening, is basically, you know, and I think that the industry is feeling it, and it will trickle down to the consumer in terms of the impacts on homes. But we can speed this up by vocalizing it and sharing it within marketing material. I am going to go to one other question from Florian Lolum. I hope I pronounced that right, Florian. Beyond EPC ratings, what kind of innovation on sustainability are becoming more mainstream, notably in terms of water and waste management? I think, John, this might be a question for you, and then coming on to Sam. So, you know, beyond the ratings, like what else is becoming more mainstream? What are you seeing that you may be rolling out in your buildings?
Yeah, I think, as I alluded to in my opening question, actually, Rory, I think whole life carbon and embodied carbon is going to get a lot more traction. It has been the elephant in the room. Over the last sort of 3 or 4 years, there's been quite a lot of focus on the operational performance of a building. But with regards to some of the other points, I think automated vacuum collection systems, you know, potentially managing waste underground, that could be an area for sort of future innovation. And obviously, you've got grey water grey water recycling as well as is technology that's been there as well. And just coming up to the last point around sort of going above and beyond Section 106. Well, actually, last year at Telford, we had 42%, affordable homes, be it social rent, affordable rent, or shared ownership. So we have gone that little bit above local authority London plan minimum requirements. So hopefully that answers Florian's question there.
And Sam, from your perspective, what are you seeing as kind of becoming more mainstream to EPCs? What I suppose one of the questions we were going to ask is what would you expect to see as a standard if you weren't doing a sort of passive house sort of super eco-focused development? What would you now, if you were a major national house builder or build-to-rent developer, what would you be factoring into your buildings as a baseline to kind of pass on that benefit?
The obvious ones, Rory. So solar panels are almost a given in most developments. Consumers are expecting those as a standard. Heat pumps. Electrically obviously fed heat pumps as a standard over, obviously, with the gas being
we might have lost Sam. Let's move on. We've got lots of good questions coming in.
Ones that sit in the background that probably consumers don't know about. So there's
Sam,
waste recovery.
We lost you just halfway through that, mate. I'm sorry. So we only got the end of that. But Jonathan, Scott, are there alternatives to EPCs in the market? Anna, John, are there?
Yes, not well known and not necessarily recognised in the way that you have to remember that now with the national trading standards, agents have to obviously list the EPC of a property and inform the buyer of the property. There will be more moves coming from the national trading standards around this, and transparency is going to become very, very important in listing properties and how consumers engage with the different data points that are available. At the moment, EPC is the rating and qualifier considered by the UK government at the moment. There are other standardizations and frameworks outside of EPC that you can use. I think actually John mentioned some of them earlier. So there are tools out there to show more holistically how sustainable a property is, but they are not well known by the public at the moment.
No. John, what's your take on that? I mean, obviously we've talked about next gen, etc., but are there any other options outside of the EPC for a developer to illustrate to the consumer?
Well, yeah, it probably links to one of the other questions that we've had through on Home Quality Mark, which I referenced earlier. Obviously, Home Quality Mark is looking holistically at a sort of broad spectrum of sustainability features that go into creating a home. But I think it's fair to say it's very end user occupied, and I think HQM has been getting a lot more traction over the last 18 months. We're certainly now starting to see local authorities champion HQM, in addition to some of our investors who are requesting it as a green building certification. But as I say, that standard is there to give buyers, home occupiers that snapshot of 4-star, 5-star. It is an alternative barometer that you can use to EPC, which is quite narrowly focused on just the sort of energy performance of the building, with its much perceived flaws that we're all well aware of as well. But yeah, I think HQM is going to get a lot more traction going forward.
Great. Okay. Well, Paul Brickles, hopefully that answers your question, which is fantastic. Thank you, John. So we've had some interesting stats shared by Andrew, your colleague, John, Andrew Day at Hill Homes, who mentioned, based on the HBF report, what a save. New build buyers save over £2,000 in energy bills, and houses average saving £2,600, and apartments £1,200. I'm guessing that's annually. Bungalows and maisonettes also mentioned. And then average new build home emitted 1.4 tonnes of carbon over the year, whilst the average existing dwelling emitted 3.7 tonnes. I mean, these are the sorts of stats I think that should be included in marketing materials, brochures, and it's exactly the sort of thing actually Anna, with your colleague Alex Rose, who runs New Homes at Zoopla. I know he's constantly being asked, particularly with the introduction of a cost per lead subscription on Zoopla, which is really sort of changing the way portals can charge developers. But making sure that you're surfacing what can really make a difference in people's decision making, and I think those stats shout about that. Thank you for sharing, Andrew. But being practical. One other question we had, not sustainability related, from Victoria Simmons, I think from Unite. Hi, Victoria. Do HomeViews surveys include PBSA? We don't specifically survey PBSA buildings. However, a lot of our residents in new build, as you can imagine, are students within build to rent, but also in the private rented sector, and it is something we are considering moving into. But for now, it's just been build to rent, build to sell, housing associations, and we're considering moving into later living as well. I hope that answers your question. Well, guys, I think we've covered a kind of number of points today. I suppose what I'd like to get from each of you just before we sign off is, with everything that's going on in the world at the moment, there's clearly going to be an acceleration in I think the consumer want for understanding how their home does perform from a sustainability perspective, how it performs from an energy perspective. What do you think we can expect to see in the next 5 years really accelerate, and what would you like to see? And Anna, maybe I could pose that to you first.
Well, we've talked about the banks a little bit today. I think we can absolutely start to expect to see the banks investing in different ways to support homeowners or buyers, either retrofitting resale properties or supporting them get into properties that are already retrofitted or new build. I think the banks are looking very seriously at how they can look at their portfolio and feel very comfortable that they are shifting the mortgages that they've currently got out there into the most sustainable space. They are very focused on that. And so whether or not that's green loans that are associated to the property, whether or not that is reduced mortgage rates for new builds, they are going to get creative about this. I've heard it from a few of them, and actually Santander, the UK CEO, posted just Thursday a really interesting infographic about ESG and EPC ratings and how people are shifting. So my focus is on the banks. I think they're going to make some really big moves over the next few years.
Very interesting, and actually something we haven't talked much about today: retrofitting. One of the most daunting things I've heard is how the task facing housing associations, who obviously and some other well, mainly housing associations who own huge portfolios, including a lot of older buildings, and the sustainable credentials that the housing sector is being asked to meet. Actually, instead of holding on to this stock, a lot of HAs are having to consider selling it, because the investment needed to get these older homes up to the standards required is just too
Isn't
much.
worth it.
And when you overlay that constant housing need, the constant increase in prices, and whether that be for rental or for sale, I think that is really something that can only be addressed with I think being realistic from a government perspective on older homes, a focus on how technology can get those older homes really up to standard as quickly as possible, and hopefully making money readily available for that to happen, because a bird in hand is better than two in the tree. So I think that's really something we need to focus on and get better at. John, what's your take on what you think is going to kind of rise up this agenda in the next 5 years?
Yeah, I mean, my hope is the sector is going to respond to the net zero agenda. We need greater cross collaboration. I think the Future Homes Hub is going to be really important, and mediating those expectations with government and policy leaders. I'm hopeful as well that there's going to be greater consumer awareness around energy efficiency and carbon. I think the last few months, I think there's almost been an epiphany with regards to the general public and the sensitivity around energy. And just to echo Andrew Day's stats that he flashed up earlier, I mean, our parent company's done some recent research, and a new build home is 51% more efficient from an energy perspective. It lowers bills by 51%, and also you've got 55% fewer carbon emissions. So there's some really powerful metrics that I need to, that I think, with cooperation with Anna and her team and others, we really need to disseminate that message, I think, to consumers to really spread the word, so to speak.
No, I really agree with you on that. And listen, I can say hand on heart from the whole of the HomeViews team, we're going to be dedicated to projecting that message to our 2 million visitors a year. And definitely, whether we're even considering at the moment, it's just difficult because there aren't, as we've discussed, many kite marks or any ratings to show that sustainability, but to make sure that buildings do have those accreditations, that they are shown up front, but also making sure that our content is educating the consumer on sustainability. Sam, lastly to you, for the next 5 years, what do you see as really rising up the agenda and becoming more important to you in this space?
Well, I hope you can hear me okay, but it sort of echoes what Anna and John were. So the bank, we're already seeing it with the banks and the development fund really putting sustainability at the top of their agenda. That's in line with our business strategy and our delivery. I think from a planning point of view, I think that's our biggest struggle, and having more focus and reward, dare I say it, for sustainable developers, having more weight on promoting sites and more reward on that respect. And then it's the education for end consumers, really. So the bit I'm passionate about is understanding the greenwash and what Anna touched on earlier on, this EPC ratings, the carbon ratings, and really factoring that into what that actually means for the general public, and not rather than just a figure that has no reference to anything. I think that's been one of the biggest frustrations, is there's no consumer level reference to these stats. EPC is the only one that they refer to in terms of the carbon. All that we can work, but it's got to really hard to promote that. So I think it is coming. Will come, and it's gone a long way the last year. So yeah, very much hope and expect more focus on that.
Yeah. Well, listen, I couldn't agree more. I think a couple of takes out for me just before we wrap up, slightly ahead of time actually, but then it will give you, oh no, we've had another question come in. Please do send any questions you've got. We've got 7 minutes of this expert panel. They would be charging huge hourly rates for their consultancy, but no, you've got them for free. One thing I would say on that education piece, I think that even when particularly in build to rent, although tenants, as our data is showing, maybe don't choose with as much information or as much weight on some of the features that an owner would. I really do think that getting some of these stats about their impact through the fact that these buildings are more sustainable. One great thing that Moda was doing I can't remember which building it was actually telling the resident where they sit in the roster of energy use within that building. So they know as a resident, you're in the top 25% of energy use, and it's not, I just think things like that, clever ways of when you are managing a community in perpetuity, I thought that was such a great way of making people aware of their energy footprint. In exactly the same way as a smart meter in someone's home really gives you a wake-up call as to how much energy you're using. I know I've definitely become, running around turning lights off and shouting at my family when they've got sort of various different bits and pieces on that they don't need to. So just answering a couple of questions that came in. Emma Fletcher, how do you think the 30-year responsibility under the new Environment Act will impact on the housing building industry? Who will take responsibility for it? Wow. Big question. John, do you want to try and take that on?
Yeah, nice easy one there for me, Rory. Yeah, look, I think it's going to be a real challenge. We're grappling with the implications at Telford's at the moment. Obviously, biodiversity net gain and environmental net gain. We've now got to produce you know, we've got to produce habitat management plans with that 30-year look, which obviously it comes into effect as part of planning end of November next year. So we've still got a little bit of time, but we have it as an internal indicator. So we are starting to you know, cascade those requirements across the business and across the departments within Telford and raise awareness that this is coming. We need to take a a 30-year view on things, with especially with regards to, as I said, biodiversity and environmental net gain. So yeah, I think we're still trying to digest that, Rory, and fully understand. But as I say, we've got about a year before it comes into effect. So, but it's absolutely right that we're considering it at the moment.
So Emma's question, that was a very diplomatic answer. But who will?
I did my best.
Who will take responsibility for it? Emma, I think, like from my perspective, being objective now, sitting here with kind of, I think it needs to be multiple stakeholders within the industry. The developers obviously need to take control of it. I think the advisors and the consultants, a lot of architects that we're working with are really putting this as front and center when they're discussing, the building design. Whether it comes through the planning and lenders as well. I think this is a collective effort, but whether or not that answers your question on who will take responsibility for it, I don't know, Emma. Paul Brickles, heating within homes, what's the silver bullet? This is really interesting, actually. I was on the phone to a national house builder the other day, and they were saying, we have this choice of including sort of electric heating within a house or a ground source heat pump. Obviously one is much more sustainable than the other, but residents just don't see the value in the ground source heat pump. Is there any new technology or anything apart from the ground source heat pumps within heating within homes that you see as a silver bullet? Maybe Sam or John, what do you think about that?
Well, sorry, you go, Anna.
Well, I was just going to say they had that new research out the other day that debunked hydrogen, which I think was the government were pretty cross about, because they had put a lot of weight behind hydrogen and hoping that they could test it, build the infrastructure, and use it to heat homes. And quite a few scientists have now come back and said it's just not viable. So it's going to be very, very interesting to see how the government pivots on that in terms of where they decide to invest from an infrastructure perspective.
It's really challenging from a retrofitting point of view. Air source heat pumps and ground source heat pumps just don't work unless you're upgrading your home's energy performance. Yeah. So it's going to cost end user a lot more money to run an air source heat pump, although obviously their carbon footprint will a lot lower, and people just won't invest in that because it's got to go hand in hand, kind of in line with our ethos really of building a well insulated box that has a very low heat demand. So. Well, I think we're still looking, aren't they, for that silver bullet in answer, but doesn't seem to be one round. I mean, all the new manufacturers have made all their boilers compatible with hydrogen as sort of an edge against the market, and know that. And obviously, it was a very strong argument for the infrastructure is already in the majority of cities, and not having to unwind the existing infrastructure. But yeah, there's lots of noises. Like I was saying that's not really going to take any legs in the coming years.
Well, panelists, Anna, John, Sam, thank you so much for joining me and our attendees today. It's been a really fascinating session. I think, what the takeouts for me are clear, that we all need to get better on educating the consumer. We all have a chance to do that as deliverers of homes, managers of homes, and as consumer websites like ourselves and Zoopla. And you'll be hearing a lot more from HomeViews in the sustainability space. We'll be doing this report annually and making sure that we're increasing the sustainability agenda awareness to the consumer and to the industry as well. But thank you so much, everyone, for joining. Please enjoy reading the report and get in contact with us if you have any questions. But thank you very much.